Hey, good morning. Welcome to Sunday. What a great time to be together again this second week that we're coming to you via video. So thanks for tuning in. No matter what day you're doing it, it's amazing we have this platform. So we just want you to know, man, we've been thinking about you, praying for you, believing God's best for you. And it's so fun to connect this way with you today. You know, I don't know how you are wired. What I mean by that, how your personality is put together. I don't know if you've ever done one of those personality tests, like the DISC test or maybe the Enneagram. That's pretty popular right now, and it gives you a number of what you are. And you know, I think I'm naturally wired to be curious, but I'm not wired like to go and take apart the toaster and try to put it back together just to see how it's made. I'm not that type. I just can't figure out how people can come up with stuff. I am so glad that the inventions that are amazing today weren't dependent on my mind. Like, who ever figured out that a coffee bean on a bush could be picked and dried and roasted and ground up and mixed with hot water and become the most glorious way to start any day? I don't know who did that. You know, Sandy and I have probably been watching way too much Netflix, but we watch these movies, and sometimes I just feel so dumb, right? These movies, like, where are they going with this? How are they going to get this all back together? And they do. They end up doing it. But I want to figure things out, and sometimes I want God to be plain. So I'm like, God, if you would just show up in a miraculous way, we would all understand this. I don't know if you've ever felt that way. And could it be that God is so apparent that sometimes we just miss him? But we want God to do something spectacular, and sometimes I wonder if God just says, well, like what? Spectacular like what? Like, how about I create a rock suspended in space, populate it with people and living things, and have all the elements be just the right distance away from the sun, and just all the elements to sustain life, unlike any other planet in the solar system. And we think, well, yeah, but why don't you do something like, you know, amazing, like truly amazing. Oh, like maybe a 576 megapixel camera that I not only give you one, I give you two, and I attach them to the front of your head. And not only that, but I connect those to a 3,000 gigahertz computer called your brain so that you can check out all this stuff. I mean, is that spectacular enough? And I don't know, just before I finish giving you this thought, did you know that 50,000 cells in your body has just died and been replaced with a brand new set of 50,000 cells? Those things are crazy. And we say, well, how about like a miraculous healing? How about something like that? But then I stop and think that, you know, this 3,000 gigahertz computer that God has put in our heads, some people have taken that gift and talent and have come up with things to treat diseases. And you know, if first century people were to visit our hospitals today, they would think that our doctors and the things that we can do today are basically like God. But you know, we are in this series. Here's where we're going with this. We're in this series in the book of John, and we're calling it The Bystander, John and the Rabbi from Nazareth. And we're walking through John's book, and he journeys through this, and he documents these experiences so that future generations will know what happened. And he has an agenda to his book. It's different than the other books of the Bible, and definitely different than the other Gospels, but his agenda is plain in John chapter 20, verse 31. Here's his thesis statement. He says, "These are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you might have life in his name." So he organizes his account around signs. Other Gospels call them miracles, but they're not just random acts of benevolence. They're specific signs revealing who Jesus is, not just what he did, but why he did it. And so today we come to the fifth sign, or if you're following along in your Bible, your heading will say in John chapter 9, Jesus heals the man born blind. Now we're finding that his ministry is taking him north and south in Israel. He goes south to Judea and Jerusalem, where he's always in danger of being arrested, and then he'll work his way back north to Galilee, which was his home base. But in John chapter 9, we find him back in the area of Jerusalem. And we read the story like this. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. There's something interesting here that I discovered as I was studying this. Do you know this is the only place in the four Gospels where someone who was ill or lame is described as having it from birth? Just kind of interesting. In the book of Acts it says something, but not in the other four Gospels. That's free today. Just want to give you something extra. But he says his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Now you see, the reason they ask is that it was assumed that sin and suffering were connected. And they were considered to be cause and effect. If you sin, you suffer. Now, sometimes suffering is connected to behavior. It's the consequence of someone's behavior, either ours or others. And when that's the case, it's obvious. But when it's not obvious, there's no connection. And Jesus makes this point when he says, neither this man nor his parents sinned, Jesus said. But this happened so that, now don't miss the so that, the works of God might be displayed in him. Jesus taught that our pain can have a purpose. Perhaps it always has a purpose. It certainly did. This man's pain had a purpose, and perhaps your pain will serve a purpose as well. And you know, I think this is so relevant right now where we're at today with this COVID-19 and this virus that's going around our globe. And so many questions of why, and so many questions of why now and why us and why all this fear. Is this a judgment on our world? Is this a judgment on America? Is America done? But I'm encouraged when I see that so that the works of God might be displayed. Sometimes God chooses to display his power on the stage of our suffering. Sometimes God's the biggest when we are totally out of control. Sometimes God uses stuff like this, like not only the story in the Bible, but like what we're experiencing right now, to turn us and turn our attention to him. He doesn't cause it, but he can certainly use it. I've seen that he's done it in my own life, and I'm sure you've seen it, that he can do it in yours. But Jesus turned to them and said, as long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. To which the guys probably responded, we're talking about this guy. And Jesus goes on and says, while I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. What's Jesus' point here? He's basically saying my identity will never be more obvious than it is right now. The light of the world will never be brighter than it is right now. You need to pay attention. You need to see it. And you need to believe in it. Your generation is going to see. So watch and believe. That's what Jesus is saying. And after he said this, verse 6, it says, he spit on the ground and made some mud with saliva, and he put it in the man's eyes. Now, I've got to know more about this story. I mean, I'm kind of I grew up a TV generation. I want to see this played out. But this right here gets a little bit interesting. We need details. I mean, like, the guy's blind. All he can do is hear. And I wonder if he hears Jesus like and start mixing up mud. And then not only that, but he just puts it on his eyes. Did he ask permission? Did he say this is going to get ugly or what? I mean, I can just see this blind man standing there and all of a sudden mud goes in his eyes. And he's like, come on now. But that's just my brain. Sorry. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. You know, it's interesting to see what's happening here because it's what we're having to do right now. The blind man literally walks by faith and not by sight. He's choosing to trust in someone based on rumors. And isn't that what the Christian faith and the Christian walk is all about? So the man went and washed and came home seeing. It's an incredible sign. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? He claimed that he was. Now this gets really good. I love the narrative here. And others said, no, he only looks like him. But He himself insisted, hey guys, I am the man. How then were your eyes opened? They asked. And he replied, the man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. Now let me just tell you, I hope for his sake no one ever tells him how that mud was made. Some things are not to be shared. But he told me to go to Siloam and to wash. And I went and I washed, and then I could see. Where is the man, they asked. And he says, I don't know. Or, hello, you remember I was blind at the time and I had mud in my eyes. Forgive me if I didn't see which way he went. That's just my interpretation. Sorry about that. But in verse 12 it says, I don't know, he said. And they brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day in which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was the Sabbath. Here we go again. Won't Jesus ever learn? According to the traditions of the elders, kneading mud or kneading anything, mixing, was violating the Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees asked how he had received his sight, and he put mud in my eyes, the man replied, and I washed, and now I see. And some of the Pharisees says, this man is not from God. He does not keep the Sabbath. Well, he didn't keep their version of the Sabbath, but here is what they're really saying is, this doesn't fit in our God box. Verse 16 it says, but others asked, how can a sinner perform such signs? So they were divided, and they turned again to the man. What have you to say about him? It was your eyes he opened. The man replied, he is a prophet. They still did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. They call him the parents, right? Is this your son? They ask. Is he the one you say was born blind? How is it now that he can see? And they answer, we know this is our son, the parents answered. And we know he was born blind. But how he can see now or who opened his eyes, we don't know. He's old enough. Ask him. Now, verse 22 explains why they answered in this way. You see, the Jewish leaders had already decided or agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Christ would be put out of the synagogue. And for this reason, his parents said, he's an adult, ask him. You see, his parents were afraid of the Jewish leaders. And isn't it interesting? They had already agreed, or they had already decided. They had made up their minds. There wasn't room in their worldview. There wasn't room in their theology for what was happening right before their eyes. It's crazy. Belief in Jesus would mean, in this setting, for these people that belonged to a synagogue, which was the center of their community, believing in Jesus would mean they'd be ostracized or excommunicated, if you want to get specific. And the religious leaders were blinded by their presuppositions and their assumptions, or what I would like to say today, they were blinded by choice. Verse 24, it said, the second time they summoned the man who had been blind. Give glory to God by telling the truth, they said. We know this man is a sinner. And then we see this guy. I mean, he's just gotten sight for the first time ever. I don't know if we don't want to miss that. This guy's blind since birth. He's seeing everything. Probably ticked that he's getting called away from viewing and seeing everything he's wanted to see to answer questions, but he gets pretty bold and he says this, whether he's a sinner or not, I do not know. What's he saying? I don't know everything. I don't understand everything. I don't have to understand everything to believe something, is what he's saying. Here's the good news. Neither do you or I. Maybe this is what's been tripping you up. You know, I talk to a lot of people and they want to talk about their faith. Maybe they've walked away from the faith. Maybe they're doubting their faith. And it seems like they want to get it all figured out in their mind. Well, I've had everything answered. If God would just do one thing, then I could see that everything was locked in and I could just figure it out. Then I'll believe. After what? After a sign? You know what? You want to understand everything before you believe anything. And I think this story, this account, what Jesus is doing here really addresses that. And I get that. Isn't it true that, we want to understand things, but it's not true in any other area of life. Do you understand love? You understand exactly how it works? 2 years ago, I got hit by a love train, and I don't understand it, but I believe it. Do you understand how power works? Do you understand exactly how it works? No, but we go and use it. Do you understand energy? Do you understand information? Do you understand consciousness? Can you explain it? And I know there's one smarty pants in the room that probably can, but most of us, every day, you believe things that you don't fully understand. And he replied, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. But I love this part. But here's what I do know. I was blind, and now I see. The story is the same for millions and millions and millions of Christ followers today. I can't explain it all. I don't understand it all. But here's what I know. I was at the end of myself. Here's what I know. I cried out for help. And God was there. My life has never been the same. I can't explain it all, but I know that God has touched me. I can't explain why the stuff has happened in my life, but God has been there. And let me tell you, some of the most painful times in my life that I've never understood why they happened, God was the clearest. And God was there. Let me tell you right now, in the middle of all this mess, we can say, God, I don't understand this COVID-19. I don't know why or where or how, but I trust you to be true. In verse 26, and they ask him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? And then you can see his patience is wearing thin. In verse 27, he answered them, I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? And they hurled insults at him and said, you are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from. The man answered, now isn't that remarkable? You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. Hello, the miracle is undeniable. Hello, God is acting right there. This man is saying, isn't it obvious? Only God could do that. How much more evidence do you need? Open your eyes. If this man were not from God, he says, he could do nothing. And they replied, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out. What did they say? They told him, basically they were saying, think about how harsh this is. You deserve to be blind. You deserved this sickness. You deserved that divorce. You deserved that bankruptcy. You deserved that pain. And they threw him out. It must be sin. No. Let me tell you, they were blind by choice, or what we talked about in the first week, willful blindness. They refused to look. They refused to see what could be seen. And refusing to discover what can be discovered is not flattering to anyone, especially Christians. And you know what? The church is not immune to this. Historically, the church has resisted science. And we've resisted and we've stiff-armed people that we think aren't like us or can't be with us. And it's made us look more like these religious leaders in this story. I have to figure this all out, and I know that you're not going to heaven, so I don't want anything to do with you. Here's my favorite. I love it, and I've heard people say this. The God I serve wouldn't do what? The God you serve would be more like what? You? Judge the way you do? Treat people the way you do? I hope it's a little different than that. But what happens when we do that, and here's the point of today, is that we're limiting God to the God of a box. Here's my understanding. It's got to fit in there. And you'll be tempted not to look at anything that doesn't fit in your box. That doesn't fit in my box, so nope, I'm going to dismiss it. I think Christians, Christ followers, should be the most curious, the most fearless, the most accommodating, the most accepting people in any setting at any time. That's what I love about Family Life Church. We always say we want to create a safe, authentic environment where people can connect with Jesus. And I've heard that. People walk in and say, I felt at home. I felt connected. We're not perfect. But I think when I see this story and I see how religious people with a box act, I want to be so much bigger than that. I want my gaze, I want my eyes open. I want to see what's going on, even if I don't understand it. If you're not a Christian, or maybe you used to be a Christian, let me ask you this. Have you really looked lately? Have you shut the door once and for all because you can't figure it all out? And is that really wise? I pray that this passage is speaking to you. Maybe you have a God box. I know I've had a God box before. Do you immediately discount anything that doesn't immediately fit in that box? Perhaps that's why you've had trouble with certain people or certain places, or maybe even with faith. Maybe the God you quit believing in was similar to the God of the box some Christians are trying to defend. Wow. And I've had good friends. I've had friends, people that I care deeply about, that have walked away from faith or walked away from the church, maybe over politics, or maybe because they don't think that the God that they serve would ever accept. But hear me. We can see and learn so much through what we are facing right now. I know we may never know the why to all of this, but God is showing up in miraculous ways. And if you push past the politics, please push past the politics of it all. I'm seeing people caring for one another and opening up to one another and connecting in creative ways like never before. God is showing up. Here's the deal. Perhaps God is bigger than you thought he was. Perhaps God is bigger than you were taught he was. And when it all boils down, I just want you to know, and this might sound funny, but it's okay to be wrong. It's okay not to know everything, is what I'm saying. We're all going to be wrong about some things, and maybe we're going to be wrong about most things. But here's the deal. We're all learning, but here's what I would suggest. It's not okay not to look if there's something to be seen. It's not okay not to look if there's something to be seen. And John's message becomes very simple. There's something that you've got to see here, is what he's saying. I've given my account, hoping that once you've heard and saw what we saw, that you would, back to where we started, John 20:31, that you would believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you might have life in his name. Jesus busted into a place and time to show a God that was so outside of the box that most people wouldn't believe it. Think about that. Jesus is God with skin on. And so many missed it because they refused to see what could be seen. Because it didn't fit in the way and the things they'd invested in. They were blind by choice. Here's what I think John would say to us. I was just a bystander of this whole thing. I had the privilege to live in the days when the light of the world touched down on the earth. And it was so much bigger, it was so much better than we thought it was. He would say later that God so loved the world that he gave himself that no one would be lost to God. That's the point. God is showing up. He's showing himself so that no one is lost to him. I'm sure John would say, when Jesus died, just like everybody else, we thought we'd been fooled. We thought we had put everything into the wrong box. And then he came back to life, and he was exactly who he claimed to be. Think about how many boxes were busted open when Jesus busted out of the tomb. Powerful. So I'm going to let God be bigger than I maybe think he is. I'm going to look for him in places I might not expect to see him. I'm going to allow him, even if I don't understand it, I'm going to allow God to be bigger than my perception. And I'm going to trust him. Because he is who he says he is. And according to John, he said, I've seen it, I've touched it, and I'm telling you the story. And once you believe that he is the Son of God, you're going to have life in his name. Let's pray. Jesus, I thank you for my friends that are watching this right now. And God, I thank you for this word. There's comedy in here, there's craziness in here, but God, there's so much truth in here that you are so much bigger than the box. God, help us to destroy the box. Help us to open our arms to you and to others. Help us not to be blind by choice. Help us to look for you, because when we're asking about signs and wonders and stuff, if we would just look, we can see them everywhere. If we'll look for you. Father, I pray right now for those that are watching this right now, whether it's on a phone or on a laptop or on TV, whether it's on Sunday at 10 or Sunday night or during the week, God, that you would minister. God, I believe, I've prayed for this already, that you would anoint this word and you'd be right there with them. And God, they would realize maybe they've been discouraged by what they've been seeing and hearing, but God, that you would just come and be very real right now. Connect with their hearts. In Jesus' name. You know, usually I'm able to say at this point when we're in a building, when we do things the way we used to do them, I say maybe you don't have a relationship with Christ. And it's so cool that you can make that decision wherever you're at. And I would just encourage you, why don't you look into the things and the claims of Jesus? You will find life there. And it's as easy and yet profound as saying, Jesus, come into my life. Also, maybe you could say, quite honest, that the fear of this situation and what's going on, and rightly so, this is a scary time, but maybe the fear is becoming bigger than your trust in God. And I would encourage you, God wants to be very real to you today, and he will stand. He will be real in this time of pain and difficulty. Or like Jesus said, these things happen that God's power and glory will be seen in this situation. And that's what we're praying for you today. Would you trust Jesus with this today? I just want you to know that we have been praying for you, and some of you have received text, emails, weekly devotions. Please, I know on our website there is a prayer request. You can click on that. Sometimes it feels better to kind of write down the things that we're praying about, write down the things that maybe we're even concerned about. When you send that off, it goes straight to our prayer team. We would love to be praying with you about that. But as you'll also notice on our website, there's ministry to your kids, and there's ministry to our youth on Sunday nights, and life groups. Pastor Clint is connecting with that. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, there's also weekly devotionals that we'll be sharing with you, different ones of our pastors. So we just want to encourage you to connect with that. But I want you to know that we're with you, we love you, and we miss seeing you, really. So here's the privilege that I also get that I want to be able to do right now, that I pray that until I see you again, and it might be through the video or it might be in person, that God would bless you, that God would keep you, God would turn his face towards you and shine his countenance on your life and give you peace. You know what? God is bigger than any box. Let him be God. Let him be big. You can trust him. God bless you, and have an amazing next week.
Well, hey, we want to say thanks for being here with us today, joining us in this way. We're so glad that you're here, and we hope that this message was very uplifting and inspirational for you. We want to stay connected in these ways. We also want to remind you that on our website there are a couple of different things. First of all, there's a give button. Now, we want to make sure that we continuously give and are generous so that we can meet the needs of the things that we're already helping to support, like our missionaries, outreach, things like that. So we really want to make sure that we stay generous during this time. And again, you can go to our website and check out that give button. Easy ways to give. Also on there is a button that takes you to some weekly devotions, some devos that Pastor Dave and myself are doing. We're going to bring you weekly devos on Tuesday and Thursday of each week. And so we want to stay connected in that way. So go on there, check out that button, and watch those devos weekly. And lastly, we want to remind you that on our website as well, there's a prayer button. If you have any needs, if there are things that come up that you need help with, you need prayer for, please utilize that button. Let us know about the needs that are out there that you guys have, because we want to stay connected also in this way and pray for you. So again, thanks so much for joining us today.